Hey everybody, welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and I'm so excited to review Dolemite Is My Name, the new film starring Eddie Murphy as Rudy Ray Moore himself. Now, it's important before I review the film, which I enjoyed, I'm going to say that. It's important to know I was a fan of Dolemite. I was introduced to this film by a friend of mine, TJ, who just loved old horror, cheap exploitation films, that whole sort of genre. Because we made one. I made a film called The Janitor back in the day. My review of this movie is just all relevant to that, because as a young independent filmmaker, scrappy, trying to make ends meet to make a film for several $1,000s, cheap blood and TNA and all that stuff back in the day. When I made this film, I made a horror film called The Janitor. It's on Amazon. You can find it. It's out of print now. It's becoming rare. We're waiting for a later release, do the VHS version. But when we made this film, I remember my buddy TJ introduced me to Dolemite. And what was not only did he introduce me to this film, but we got to go to a convention, and because I then knew about it and through him, I was lucky enough to meet the man himself, Rudy Ray Moore. He was so nice. There's the cane. He was at a convention we were doing, sitting there along next to us, signing autographs. People were coming by seeing him. And he got to see part of our movie, which was just so awesome to hear him. I remember him sitting there in the theater as we were screening our film, which was terrible. And there was a violent part. And we just were sitting there waiting, and I saw him from, he was in front, I was sitting from the back, and there was a point we did this gory part, and he just went, "Shit!" It was the highlight of our years. We were both very excited to just see Dolemite himself just have a visceral reaction to that, reacting to the screen. So I go back. I've always appreciated. I didn't know, though, the story. I didn't know as much of the story as this film tells, and it's being told by some wonderful people. Craig Brewer did Hustle and Flow, directed, but it was written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. I don't know how to say his last name, but you guys know these screenwriters. They wrote one of my favorite Tim Burton film. I know that might be an unpopular opinion, but they wrote Ed Wood. They wrote The People versus Larry Flint. And they also wrote Man on the Moon. They are just biopic masters. And so to hear them doing this film along with Eddie Murphy as Rudy Ray Moore, I was very excited. I reacted to the trailer before everyone else was sort of doing it to sort of because I just say that I know a lot of people were like, I didn't even know who this was. So I'm glad people are finally coming around discovering it, and I'm glad so many people are liking this film. I love the film. It's a little slow going, I think, it might be for some people, but as sort of that sort of same vibe as Ed Wood. It has that same feel of just the creator and needs to create. And the creator needs to believe in himself. As Eddie Murphy made a quote on sort of Colbert the other day, like, it's so important to, I'm actually, let me make sure I quote it directly. He said it, as sort of his response to this movie, how important it is to believe in the content that you make. He said, I quote, "That's the most important thing, believing in your stuff. If you believe in it, whatever it is, that's the most important ingredient." And he's right. And he's speaking about, of course, about Rudy Ray Moore. And the film is about, if you don't know, Rudy Ray Moore was a comedian, musician, and he was just, middle-aged, doughy, as they call him in the movie, just not the typical person you'd expect in a movie. But then also in the time where black films weren't very as prevalent or as big, he just wasn't. There was a community of folks that just didn't get movies like this, starring people that were sort of in their neighborhood, and so. Rudy Ray Moore sort of brilliantly was listening, according to this movie and things I've read, which apparently it's pretty true. Everything in this movie is pretty accurate. They obviously adjust some things, change the order of things, but overall are pretty accurate. And what he did was he had these guys would come in his club and talk about these pimps, like tell these epic tales about these pimps. And so at a certain point, he started paying attention, and because Rudy's act just wasn't working, no one was clicking to him. He sort of went and got all the stories and added punchlines and created this character based off of these legends and created this character Dolemite, as sort of this like crazy pimp, and sort of a likable one. It was crazy, but then still raunchy, and so he starts changing his act to this character, and it works. And suddenly he realizes, okay, people are reacting, and that's always the key. Whenever I give advice to people, how do we make Andy? How'd you do it? How do I create on YouTube? It's finding that niche, finding the audience, finding your superpower. What are you good at? What can you do? What's your style of humor that you can then connect to a specific audience and ride it? And so Rudy Ray Moore just knew it. He was very smart and knew how to do that. So the film really breaks down sort of that creative process of discovering that idea that is going to hit, and then the ups and downs of that journey, because it's never an easy journey when you're a creator. There's so much doubt, there's so much trouble, there's so much struggle that this film really shows it all well. And so he makes this film, he makes this album, this character rather, and he records an album. He records a party album, and because no label will record it, release it because it's more pornographic, just in language, it's just graphic language. He decides to release it himself, and so he puts it in a brown bag, prints the vinyl, gets it from a family, and takes an investment from a family member, then stamps a little devil logo on it, sort of safe for adults, and just makes it more in demand. He sells it out of his trunk. He doesn't give up. He's promoting everywhere. And I remember when I made this movie, that's how we got this movie made. I was promoting it everywhere. I would literally take postcards and put them on top of urinals in certain clubs, just to, that the DVD was out, or that we had screenings coming. I did some crazy things. So it was just fun to see the story, and I wish I had known more of the story when I met the man, because I would have had a lot, even more to ask and wisdom to try and grab. But, when you're that kind of filmmaker, you got to do everything you can do to get the word out on your brand and what you do. And that's what we do now as creators and here on YouTube and everywhere else. So the story just was very inspirational to me to watch, and just very fun. It's a, like my film, so anyway, the quick story, so the story of this movie and what you're in for. He succeeds, obviously, as in the record industry by, becoming this sort of more dangerous record that people are like, trading around town. And that catches the eye of someone who's like, well, maybe there is a way to sell this, which then they do. And he makes numerous albums. And as the albums become very popular, he goes to a movie. They see a Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau movie in the theaters, and they're just sort of bummed because they're like, what is this movie? This isn't funny. This isn't for us. And they're the only black people in the audience, and they're not laughing. They don't find it funny. And they realize, man, there's a lot of people out there like us that just don't get to see movies that are aimed towards them. And so they go out and they make, makes his mission to make Dolemite the movie, which no one wants to fund. So he puts up all his money from his, he basically gives up front all of his residuals for the comedy albums, which is the only thing that's doing well for him, to get that funding to make the movie. And then the struggle of making that movie, will it succeed? That's where the Netflix film really takes off and sort of showing you how that all works. So, I mean, it's a true story, hard to spoil. I don't know how to say, but obviously the movie's here and he's beloved, so it's got a happy ending. But what's interesting about the story is, like, you still see that struggle. And then there's interviews now, and I've gone and read even more. The things that I sort of didn't really realize about him was he was like a hip hop legend, in that he was one of the first people to really put sort of rhyming monologues to music. And so back in the day when he was doing those albums, he was, rat-a-tat-tat and these things that was sort of really early days of hip hop and rap, before a lot of other people that you'd think. And so Snoop Dogg, a lot of who's in this film, a lot of people just look up to him as sort of the grandfather of it all, as they say. And so that was really fascinating. But then as I was doing more of my due diligence after watching the movie, which I believe if you like it, you will too, it was sad because you could see some of the people who sort of kept in touch with him. He was very bitter that people didn't respect him, even in his older age, like they did Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, because he felt like he really did pave the way for so much and so many people that we look up to, but he was never sort of held in the same high regard, probably because of sort of the dirty material and sort of the cheesiness of the quality. So, even though in the reality it seems like he was unhappy with sort of the amount of success he got, which is so common with so many creators, it's fitting to now see someone he was jealous of, looking up to, Eddie Murphy, not only clearly a fan and inspired by his work, but now come forward and give back his comeback to sort of like present this story to really get people to remember him. I think just makes it even more beautiful and special, because you're watching a guy who he's a good guy, and he's working so hard to get his brand out there, his movie out there, and his friends out there. And it's some touching stuff, because I loved, sorry, I want to make sure I give her name right. Divine Joy Randolph plays Lady Reed in the film. And she has some really touching moments in the film, because he meets her in a bar, and she's just not, as she says, I'm never in movie. I've never seen myself on the screen. Thank you for putting someone like me up on screen. You've changed my life. And it's a really touching moment, because you realize all of these guys are just like, regular fun guys in the neighborhood. And he made them all sort of stars, and that made him relatable, because that's how the bulk of people in the world are. And so he saw that, and he knew it, and he ran with it, not just for his own good, but to sort of really inspire others to sort of get him out there. And he did. And to know that he did makes the movie that much more appealing. It's really, and Eddie Murphy gives a fantastic performance. It's really nice to see Eddie Murphy back doing something more, serious but funny. He's such a great actor. I'm so excited to see him come back. He's hosting Saturday Night Live in December. I cannot wait. As a Saturday Night Live historian myself, I've watched almost every episode, even the good and the bad. I will continue to do so. And he has never come back. He left. He left on bad terms, and then David Spade made some joke about him, and it's been sort of bad blood, and that's always been sort of him and Sandler, and now Sandler finally came back last year, and it was pretty funny, and now to see Eddie Murphy come back, it'll probably be disappointing. It usually is, but man, I cannot wait. The comedy geek in me is just like, oh my God, that's going to be so fun. Plus, he's going on stand-up again, Coming to America 2, I'm nervous about, but I'm going to give it a shot. It's going to be directed by Craig Brewer, same person here, so very worthy to watch, and the film just is a very funny, inspiring, touching film, surprisingly, and then I think will inspire a lot of people to go watch the original Dolemite to sort of connect the dots. And then, you'll want to watch the sequels and so on. The bed scene is from the sequel, the tornado. What does he call it? The human... It's the tornado movie. I forget the title of the sequel. But anyway, Dolemite 2, you'll want to watch that. Because they did sort of move certain scenes, iconic scenes from the other films that he's made. As the director and screenwriter said, like, Dolemite's only going to get one biopic. We wanted to make sure we showed the human tornado. I thought that was right. Dolemite 2. They wanted to make sure they showed some of the best scenes. And so Human Tornado is also, even gets more crazy. And that's the sex scene they talk about in the film that's just crazy and funny is actually from that film. So they took some liberties, but still the making of that scene was the same. But also in the film, Wesley Snipes, it's good to see him back. And he plays sort of kind of the jerk of the movie. He's like the famous person that that Rudy Ray Moore wisely is like, look, come be in my movie. You've been in movies. You'll help me get some funding. And the guy's like, why would I do that? And he's like, well, you can direct it. And then Wesley Snipes like, all right. And so just smartly give an actor the option to direct, and suddenly then you get them in it. So the whole thing is just very fun to watch. It was very reminiscent to me of Ed Wood, that sort of spirit of an independent filmmaker who's trying everything he can to get that out there for people to watch and to feel for. And I think he succeeded in life. Legend, respect, Rudy Ray Moore, I love him. Go watch the original Dolemite afterwards. I think watch this one so you understand and appreciate what you're watching, and then go check out Dolemite and have a good time watching it. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a laugh. I implore you all, check it out. It's really fun. It's on streaming now on Netflix. I definitely give it high marks. I don't know if it's going to get award contention. I'm debating about that. I've seen some people say Eddie Murphy, it'd be nice to see him get a nomination. I don't think he'll win. There's some other big acting performances that are out there right now. But it would be nice to see to get some love. But either way, good on Netflix for getting this one. I think it'll get it more seen, and that makes me happy. So check it out. Dolemite is his name. Effing up people is his game. Check it out now. Stream it on Netflix when you get the chance. Tell me what you think down in the comments below or up on social media. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll be back with more stuff soon. Bye, everybody.